Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk to you about colors. And because I'm a self taught artist, I do not make assumptions that everyone knows this. But even if you know this, I might say something that you don't know. So just take a few minutes, hear me out, and I'm going to take you through colors. The first thing I want to show you is the color wheels: the primary color wheel, the primary secondary color wheel, the primary, secondary, and tertiary color wheels. The primary color wheel is made up of red, blue, and yellow, which of course, when mixed together, they make other colors. If you mix all three of these together, you get a dark color. I won't say it's black, but I'm going to say dark. And that's really going to depend on the weight of the colors that you add into that mixture. But we'll get to that later. So let's talk now about from primary to secondary. The secondary colors are orange, green, and purple. You can get a green by mixing blue and yellow. You can get a purple or violet by mixing red and blue. You can get an orange by mixing red and yellow. This wheel represents the secondary and primary colors. And usually, as it relates to it, the colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel tends to be its complement. When you mix a blue with an orange, you'll get a kind of a grayish tone that could work for the shadows or neutral tones if you're working with either one of these colors. The same is true of if you mix green and red, or if you mix violet or purple with yellow. So that's how you would look at this wheel. Now let's stretch the wheel out just a little bit more, and we're going to talk about what they call the tertiary colors. This wheel represents the tertiary colors. And like this wheel, the colors that are on the opposite side of the color wheels represent the complements to those colors. And by mixing these two colors together, you would get a kind of a tint or a neutral tone, or some people like to even refer to it as a gray tone or a grayed down version of the color itself. I won't necessarily go into naming all of them, but I do want to point out, as we did here and here, the primary, the secondaries. I'm going to point out the tertiaries. The tertiary colors on this particular color wheel or type of color wheel would be classified as red-orange. So now let's take a quick look at that. You have red, you have orange. So the color in between those two is a red-orange. You always have to name the tertiary color with the primary first. So in the case of this yellow-orange, which is in between orange and yellow, it would be called yellow-orange, not orange-yellow, and so forth and so on. So with that being said, I'm going to quickly just run through them. You have red-orange, you have yellow-orange, you have yellow-green, you have blue-green, you have blue-violet, or if you prefer to call it blue-purple, and you have red-violet. Now, these colors are not necessarily as bright or as smooth as the natural tones that are made from just mixing the primary colors, but it does give a range of colors in the color wheel. And you could even go further than this and take it to a completely different level. Because the truth of the matter is, it is clearly said and clearly wide known that the majority of the colors we see are made up of a combination of these primary colors. That brings us to the secondary colors. That brings us to these tertiary colors. Now, when it comes to colors, it really doesn't matter who the manufacturer is. There's all kind of names for the different blues between Holbein and Winsor Newton or Daniel Smith. But you really have to pay attention to more than just red, blue, and yellow. But we're going to get to that in a second. And hopefully that, for some of you who know this basic color wheel explanation, will then maybe have a better understanding of something else. But before we get to that, I want to put out a disclaimer. I put this color wheel together, but I also wanted to work on something else. So I used the negative space to work on this stuff, which if you could do me a favor and just eliminate so we can continue our talk about the color wheel. But I want to try to stress a point here. When you think about the primary colors, when you think about blue, yellow, and red, what you have to take into consideration is, are they cool or are they warm? Now, why does that make a difference? And what signifies that? Colors that tend to be more on the blue side or have blue in it are considered cool colors. And colors that lean more towards the reddish or orangey tones, they tend to be on the warm side. And that's what you have to pay attention to, more than just the fact that they're blue, they're red, or they're yellow. And why is that significant? Because I'm going to show you here, starting with red. You take a cadmium red with, let's say, an ultramarine blue. And again, this could be a phthalo blue, this could be a cobalt blue, but for purposes of my demonstration, I'm going to just work with these basic colors to make my point. When you take a color like alizarin crimson and you mix it with ultramarine blue, you will get a version of a purple, but this is the purple you would get. And to some people, this is good enough. But if you wanted a more cleaner blue, you would have to mix alizarin crimson with ultramarine blue, and you would get this version of purple. Now, why does that make a difference? I guess it doesn't, but it kind of does. Especially if you've been one of those individuals who've taken a blue and a red, or taken a red and a yellow, or a yellow and a blue, and you got a kind of a muddy tone, and you didn't quite understand what was happening, so you just kept picking up paint, sticking it back there and stirring it, and the more you stirred, the muddier it got. Now again, don't get me wrong, this is a very useful tone, or should I call it a tint. But if you wanted a clean purple, or you wanted a clean orange, or you wanted a clean green, then you would have to know what's inside the colors. And that's what you have to pay attention to. So not just any red and any blue is going to make a purple. Because if you were to take this cad red, for example, and ultramarine blue, let's take a look at what's inside of them. The ultramarine blue has a little bit of red in it. So the fact that it has a little bit of red in it and the cadmium red has a little bit of yellow in it, what you're actually mixing here is blue, red, and yellow. And the yellow is going to dull down the color. It's going to take away from the vividness of the color. And the same can be true of the other colors that we're going to talk about. But I'm showing you this point of why the coolness and the warmness is something you have to know. Because we all buy different paints. We all have a different color palette that we consider ours. We all work within the boundaries of color, but some of us don't even know or don't even pay attention to what we're mixing together. But then we wonder why that mixture isn't performing the way that it should. Because remember, the rule is you mix blue and yellow, you get a green. Okay. But it depends on the level of green you really want. Let's go with that, for example. So you have ultramarine blue and you have lemon yellow, and you mix those two together. What you're going to end up with is a green that you probably don't want. And if you wanted a cleaner green, then you may want to mix like a cadmium yellow with a cerulean blue, or should I say, let me repeat that. Let me just take that back. If you mixed lemon yellow with cerulean blue, you would get a cleaner green. If you mixed cad yellow with cerulean blue, you would get a kind of a muddy green because of the combination of the colors that's in it. And the same would be true of the oranges. And you just need to know what that content is. The content. What is inside those colors that are going to create a chemical reaction and cause my colors not to blend well together. Cerulean blue has a little bit of yellow in it. Lemon yellow has a little bit of blue in it. So they match. The same as alizarin crimson has a little bit of blue in it. Ultramarine blue has a little bit of red in it. So they match. You get the smooth color. And then also, if you look at the oranges, the same would be true of trying to make sure you match the colors that are going to complement one another to give you a nice clean orange. Like cadmium yellow has a little bit of red in it. Cadmium red has a little bit of yellow in it. So those two would give you a much cleaner orange. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And just like I got a little thrown off, it can be daunting. It can be very confusing. But you want to try and understand that. And one of the ways you can understand how your colors work for you in your palette is when you get a new set of colors, or you have the colors you have and you have some downtime, play around with some color swatches. Take each color, little water, little color, and just make a color block. And then label them. And then try creating some mixes of those colors to see what in fact is going to happen. If you took a little bit of blue and you took a little bit of yellow and you mix them together, what green would you get? If you take cerulean blue and the lemon yellow, as I talked about earlier, or in this case, light yellow for the Winsor Newton Cotman colors, you would get this color green. If you mix phthalo blue and cad yellow together, you would get this particular shade of green. And the importance of this is it depends on what you want to do. This might make a great shadow to your green, while you might want your foliage to have a cleaner green in some places. And that's why mixing your colors together will show you what you can get out of it. And something else I like to do, I like to take these little postcards and I'll take like a lemon yellow, and then I'll put my different blues to this lemon yellow to see what I get, and even the manufacturer of that color. Because we all tend to think that when we buy a palette of colors, we have to stick with that palette of colors. Well, that's not true. You may find some Holbein colors or Daniel Smith colors or Winsor Newton professional colors to be more to your liking. So why not just mix and match those on your palette instead of feeling like you're restricted just because you bought a Winsor Newton set of colors that you have to just use Winsor Newton. I'm sure the company would be a little peeved with me saying that, but see, no one's paying me to say these things. I'm talking to you from my self-taught world. I'm talking to you from trial and error world. I'm talking to you from just doing it, and not having it just be taught. Because even after I say all this to you, you should make your own color wheel. You should make your own color tests. You should make your own color swatches. And if you have time, make your own color cards. I even go as far as to taking a color like burnt sienna, and I make a line of my burnt sienna, and then I use phthalo blue with a one-touch combination. Like I'll put out some burnt sienna, swirl it around, make nice and juicy. Then I'll take one swipe of some phthalo blue, mix it all up, and this is what I get. And then I swipe some more phthalo blue, mix it all up again. This is what I get. And I keep pulling one swipe and turning, one swipe and turning, one swipe and turning. And I keep doing this till it gets to the point that the blue is so dominant that the color will start to repeat its own self. And then I'll stop. And then I'll say to myself, okay, so now in the future, I'm working with burnt sienna and I want to mix in and get this neutral tone. About how many swipes of blue do I need to put on my brush before I get here from here? That doesn't make sense, but it does when you're working. And I'll do the same thing with cerulean blue. And then I'll do the same thing with the endothrine blue, of whatever it's called. I can't pronounce that one. Or I'll do burnt sienna and Payne's gray. And see, the Payne's gray gets dominant fast, so that's why. And so does this blue, because it's a strong blue. So that's why these are stopped here, because after this, it's just pretty much going to be more Payne's gray or more of this endothrine blue. So it doesn't change much more. But then if you go to alizarin crimson and you use the phthalo blue the same way that I just told you about the burnt sienna, look at what happens. Your natural alizarin crimson, one swipe of phthalo blue stirred into the whole mix, this is what I get. Another swipe of phthalo blue, this is what I get. This is what I get. This is what I get. And I keep going till I get to these down here. And I probably could have gone further, but my card ran out. This isn't an exercise. This is actually great reference material. Because what if I'm looking for this alizarin crimson to perform for me at different levels? I can quickly look at these cards and I can see approximately how many swipes down from what color can give me maybe what I'm looking for, or maybe what I want at the time. And of course, it depends on how strong the color is versus the water concentration, but it's still a good exercise. It's a good way to know what's going to happen with these colors. And if I wanted to get a kind of a neutral tone with my Payne's gray and warm it up, Payne's gray might be the way to go. I might could go a little further than this and have my Payne's gray with this alizarin crimson to warm it up, to give me a warm dark or a nice gradated purple or a rose color. So, and you can do colors for days. I just showed you a few. I try to do every color that I have and every combination of colors that I work with. My palette has a lot of colors, but I have 9 that are like my go-to favorites. So I try to work within those 9. But when I'm working on something like this, I want to see what kind of greens I can get. so that I don't have to rely on the store-bought green. I would rather mix my own green, and I would rather mix a few other colors than to actually use them from the tube or use them from the pan. And that's where this kind of stuff comes in handy. So this is me not concluding my color conversation. And again, I apologize if I might have stumbled a little bit, but I keep it real. And at the same time, I wanted to share with you just some basic knowledge that a lot of us take for granted. Because even though red and blue will make purple, what purple are you getting? What purple are you getting? What purple are you getting when you mix your red and your blue? Do you even think about which blue you're using? Do you even think about what's the cool or warm colors that are mixed with that? Because just like our color wheel, that you mix colors together to get a secondary color, manufacturers are mixing colors to make the colors that we use also. So even though you're getting a yellow, which yellow is it? What's in it? What's in that yellow? And is that fighting against your other color? Are you just mixing two colors? Or are you mixing three? Or in some cases, maybe even four? You know, because if you look at some of the neutrals or you look at some of the Payne's grays, they're made up of different colors. They're not a natural color. Even though your Payne's gray is in a tube, you can get a Payne's gray that leans towards the blue side. Or even a Payne's gray that kind of leans towards a red side. So what did they put in that Payne's gray? Don't you want to know? Don't you want to know in case you need to mix your own Payne's gray? Or you need to mix your own darks? Which will be the topic of my next conversation, which is why I was playing a lot with these blocks and even this. Because sometimes you want a dark that leans into the blue. Sometimes you want a dark that leans into the red. Heck, sometimes you may even want a dark that leans into the yellows or the greens. It really depends on what's your subject matter. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? So when you talk about colors, this by itself could be a lifelong learning process. Colors is not simply what I just put out for you here today. I'm putting out for you today somewhat of a challenge because you need to know the colors that you're working with. You need to know how your colors are going to react with other colors. You need to figure out, are you happy with this shade of purple or would you prefer this shade of purple? Or even more so, maybe you want both. Or maybe you want a third one that's in between this. Wouldn't you like to know how your colors are going to react to help you get that? Because that's going to help you be a better artist. Your colors are your base. If you work monochromatic, you still want to know how your colors are going to react. If you work in full blooming color, you definitely want to know how your colors are going to react. And if you're on a budget or if you're in a position where you could afford to buy anything you want, then don't you want to know what's best for you? Not for me, because these are my favorites today. The 9 that I told you about, those are my favorites today. But tomorrow, I may limit that down to 6. I may be able to find a way that I could work my magic with whatever it is that I'm doing with 6 colors and that's it. You know, and I just want to close on this note. Black. Let's talk about black quickly. Black is part of the spectrum. Whether you mixing colors together, whether you're getting it out of a tube. And black can be helpful to you if you're making neutral tones or if you're just trying to tone down a color. But if you really, really want to be a purist, then you have to understand they don't sell black and give you black in your paint palettes for nothing. You don't have to use black by itself. You can warm up colors that are you consider black or dark with other colors, and make that black work for you and not be as flat as a natural just black. So no, I wouldn't tell you use black when you want to do dark. But I would say this, you can use black in any mixtures you want, and it can be helpful to your progress depending on your subject, your style, and what you're looking to accomplish. So I would never say never use black. I wouldn't even be caught telling you what to do, but I'm suggesting to you that you may want to look at black slightly differently, especially if you can mix it with other colors. You may be surprised at what you get. Black with yellows can make some fantastic greens. That's all I'm going to say. So, again, this was my introduction to colors. It's not going to be the last one that I have. And again, I apologize when we were talking about the cool and warm, and I may have thrown you off. But the fact still remains. Some colors have red in it. Some colors have blue in it. You mix a blue color like an ultramarine that's blue with red in it, with a cadmium red that has yellow in it. You're not mixing blue and red. You're mixing blue, red, and yellow. And you're going to get a kind of a muddy tone. So if you take nothing else out of this stumble bump that I mentioned to you, learn your cools, learn your warms as it pertains to your colors, experiment with them, play with them so you can see how varying amounts of that mixture may yield you varying degrees of color. And then you'll understand why they say all colors come from the primary color wheel of red, yellow, and blue. The only thing I'm challenging you with is which red are you using? Which yellow are you using? And which blue are you using? And also, when you get a chance, look up a gentleman by the name of Munsell. Munsell. Mr. Munsell came up with a very different color wheel that I'm not even going to begin to talk about with you here today. But I'm going to leave you with that name, Munsell. Check out his color chart. And I'll talk to you next time.